We are going to continue on to our third lesson on integers. We know how to count on a number line and how to do quick mental calculations without one, but now we're going to look at what happens when we have brackets in a question. First of all, let's take a look at what it means to work with brackets. Imagine I had a number 2 sitting in front of a set of brackets where we are adding 3 and 4. What are we supposed to do here? Well, I'm sure your first instinct would be to solve the brackets, right? And that would be correct. 3 plus 4 equals 7. But I'm still stuck with that 2 in front of the 7. And look, we still have brackets. Why? Well, we can't just stick the 7 next to the 2 because that would turn it into 27, which makes no sense. We don't just go sticking numbers together for no reason in maths. Well, you know how there is a hidden comma at the end of every whole number, and how there's an invisible plus sign in front of every positive number? Well, we have a hidden multiplication sign sitting in front of every set of brackets. So, what we actually need to do here is multiply the 2 and the 7, which gives us 14. There are a number of ways to prove this is what is happening. A 2 in front of a 7 in brackets is basically saying that I have 2 sets of 7s. Or if we look back at the beginning of this example, we had the 2 in front of the brackets with 3 plus 4. This also means that we have 2 brackets with 3 plus 4 inside them. And all we need to do is add those together. Remember, multiplication is repeated addition. So the reason we say 2 times 3 is because we have 3 plus 3. Or if we said 3 times 2, it's because we have had 2 plus 2 plus 2. It's repeated addition. That's all that's happening here. Okay, so 3 plus 4 equals 7. And then I add the 2 7s together and I end up with 14, just like we got before. The same can be seen below, where we add the other 2 7s from the brackets together, which again gives us 14. There is still another way to look at this, which is commonly referred to as the distributive property. This says that when there is a number in front of a bracket, we multiply the number by everything inside the bracket. So, for example, we could multiply the 2 by 3 and then multiply the 2 by 4. 2 times 3 equals 6 and 2 times 4 equals 8. When we add the 6 and the 8 together, we still get 14. So here is more than enough proof that anything sitting in front of a bracket is going to multiply into the bracket. So now let's see what this would look like when we're working with integers. I have negative 2 minus negative 3 in brackets. Well, we now know that anything in front of a bracket needs to be multiplied in, and here we have a negative sign in front of the bracket. Here's an important rule. 2 negatives multiplied together gives us a positive answer. So this means that those 2 negatives turn into a plus sign, and our next step will read negative 2 plus 3. Let's change this slightly to say negative 2 plus negative 3 in brackets. Here, the positive sign is being multiplied into the bracket. The next rule you need to learn is that a positive multiplied by a negative will always end in a negative answer. So this means that those 2 signs turn into a minus sign, and our next step will read negative 2 minus 3. If we had to swap it around slightly, we could see the same thing happen with negative 2 minus positive 3 in brackets. We still have a negative multiplying it by a positive, which is going to give us a negative answer. So this means that our next step will read the same as it did before. The last example is if we had 2 positives. Just like when we had 2 negatives, a positive multiplied by a positive will always leave us with a positive answer. So negative 2 plus positive 3 in brackets will leave us with negative 2 plus 3. So let's quickly recap on these rules. If you have 2 signs that are the same being multiplied together, your answers will be positive. So if you've got a negative times a negative or a positive times a positive, your answer will be positive. If you have two different signs multiplying together, your answers will always be negative. So like a -2 times a +6 would give us a -3 as an answer. Have a look at -4 plus -3 in brackets. You might notice that there are different operations here, plus, minus, and brackets. And when we were learning about BODMAS, we know to look out for brackets and orders first. There are obviously no ofs or orders here, but there are a set of brackets which we need to get rid of. I'm going to draw a rectangle around my brackets and include any signs on either side of the bracket. Here, I have two different signs. So that means I need to make a new sign, which we now know is going to be negative. This means that my next step will be -4 minus 3. My signs here are the same, two negatives, so I find their sum. The sum of 4 and 3 is 7. Since both numbers are negative, my answer is -7. Take a look at this rectangle though. Do you know what this reminds me of? It looks like a battery to me, where the rectangle around the signs is the battery, and the bracket is that line separating negative and positive from each other that you normally see on a battery. So let's call these batteries and think of some easier ways to remember what signs we are working with. Here, I have a picture of 4 batteries, and the signs are arranged differently in each one of them. When I highlight the signs, I can see that some batteries have the same signs, while others have different signs. Think about it this way. Let's say that I love Brussels sprouts, and you think they are disgusting. If you don't know what I'm talking about those tiny little baby cabbages that are super bitter when you eat them. I don't really like them, but let's just, for argument's sake, say that I do. I love Brussels sprouts, and you do not like them. So I am being positive about the vegetable, and you are being negative about it. And I'm sure we would get into a disagreement about this, which is negative since disagreements can lead to fights. So think of these two different signs as arguing with each other and being negative towards each other. Then you can remember that a negative times a positive will always give you a negative answer. But let's imagine that I start talking about how I like the beach, and you agree that you like the beach. We both like something, so we are both being positive about it. And since we're both being positive, we are agreeing with each other, which is a positive feeling. But what about the negatives? Well, I don't care much for crime, and I'm sure that you don't like it too. We would both talk negatively about crime, but we would both still be agreeing that it's bad. And since we are still in an agreement, we can have a positive conversation. So think of two of the same signs as agreeing with each other and being positive towards each other. Then you can remember that a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative will always give you a positive outcome. Let's look at this practically. In my first example, I've got a positive times a negative, and they're going to give me a negative because they are disagreeing with each other. In the next example, I've got a positive times a positive. That's going to give me positive because they're both agreeing with each other. Then I've got a negative times a negative. That's going to give me a positive because although they're being negative, they're both agreeing about being negative, so it's positive. And then again, I've got a negative times a positive, which is going to give me a negative sign. Let's try some examples. Since I have brackets, I'm going to begin by putting in some batteries. But hang on, in the second example, there is no sign with the 6. What is always hidden in front of a positive number? The plus sign. So I can insert it and then continue to insert my batteries. The same can be done for the positive 5 in question 4. Okay, let's order our steps so we don't get lost. First, we need to identify brackets, which we've done, and then we need to insert our batteries. Now we're going to use our batteries to create a new sign. The first 2 questions have different signs, so they're arguing, and the next 2 examples have the same signs, they're agreeing. So my positive and negatives are going to give me negatives, while my 2 negatives and 2 positives are going to give me a positive answer. Write the new signs directly underneath and rewrite everything that was not in the battery exactly where it was originally, just like how we learned to do this in BODMAS. This is us writing our next step. Now we need to check the signs on our new step to determine if we're solving same sum or different difference, followed by us then calculating the answers. So in question 1, we've got a positive 8 and a negative 3, so our signs are different, so we find the difference. We find the difference between 8 and 3. 8 minus 3 gives me 5, and 8 is further from 0, and it's positive, so my answer is positive 5. In question 2, I've got 2 negatives, so my signs are the same, so I find the sum. So I find the sum of 6 and 4. 6 and 4 give me 10, and since they're both negative, my answer is going to be negative 10. For question 3, I've got negative 12 plus 10. The signs are different, so I find the difference. I find the difference of 12 and 10. 12 minus 10 gives me 2. My 12 is further from 0, and it's negative, so my answer is negative 2. For the last one, positive 15 plus 5. My signs are the same, so I find the sum. I find the sum of 15 and 5. 15 and 5 give me 20. They were both positive, so my answer is positive 20. To recap, you will always begin by step 1, looking at brackets, and if there are no brackets, then you can jump straight down to checking to see if the signs are same sum or different difference. An important note: no numbers are allowed inside of batteries. So for example, here I've got 4 plus negative 2 in brackets. I'm going to put my battery around my signs, and I've got a positive and a negative, so they're going to give me a negative. So my next step will say 4 minus 2, and so far that's correct. Here's where things go wrong. I've got positive 4 minus 2, and some people will get a bit confused here with the batteries and think, okay, well, I've got a positive times a negative, so that gives me a negative. And yes, while that's correct, there's no multiplication sign here. Remember, the reason we're multiplying the positives and negatives with brackets is because there's a hidden multiplication sign there. But where there's no brackets, it's just a positive 4 minus 2. Now, I think you could do it on your fingers. 4 minus 2 is going to give me 2. So I can't just go and rewrite that as 4 minus 2 on the next step. And here's why. Have a look at an example like this. I've got negative 4 minus negative 2 in brackets. So I've got a negative times a negative, which gives me a positive. And negative 4 plus 2 is actually going to give me negative 2 as an answer. But if I were to say negative 4 plus 2 and put a battery around the negative and the 4 and the plus and say, oh, okay, well, I've got a negative times a positive, which gives me a negative, so 4 minus 2, that's going to give me 2, right? But negative 2 is not equal to positive 2. So it's really important that you remember that batteries are only used with brackets. If there's no brackets, all you're doing is you're looking to see if the signs are the same to find their sum, or if the signs are different to find their difference. Pause the video and try some of these examples to see how you're doing. Okay, let's check in. The first thing I'm going to do is look to see if I've got brackets. And obviously in all of these examples we do, because it's something we need to practice. So I'm going to go and put a battery around all of my brackets and remember to fill in any plus signs for any positive numbers that are missing them. Once I have put my batteries around my brackets, now that I've used the highlighter to see whether I've got the same signs being multiplied together or different signs being multiplied together, I'm going to go and write down the new sign underneath each and every one of these quickly. So underneath the two negatives being multiplied together in question 1, I'm going to write a positive. Underneath the positive and negative in question 2, I'm going to write a negative. And so I'm going to continue. Question 3, I get a new sign of a positive. Question 4 gives me a positive as a new sign, and the same for question 5. Question 6 gives me a negative. Question 7 and question 8 both give me negatives as my new signs. Right, so now I can write out my next step, keeping everything that wasn't in the battery in exactly the same place. So for question 1, I'll have negative 5 plus 8. For question 2, 1 minus 6. Question 3, negative 5 plus 6. Question 4, 4 plus 7. Question 5, 2 plus 8. Question 6, negative 9 minus 4. Question 7, 8 minus 3. And question 8, negative 3 minus 10. Now, remember, we don't have brackets anymore. They're gone. So our batteries are done. We can't now go start using our rules for multiplying when there is no more multiplying to be done. So now what we're going to do is look to see if our signs are the same or are they different. So for question 1, my signs are different, so I find the difference. I find the difference of 8 and 5. 8 minus 5 gives me 3. 8 is further from 0 than 5. 8 is positive, so my answer is positive 3. For question 2, my signs are different, so I find the difference. I find the difference of 6 and 1. 6 minus 1 gives me 5, and the 6 is further from 0, and it's negative, so my answer is negative 5. For number 3, my signs are different, so I find the difference. I find the difference of 6 and 5. 6 minus 5 gives me 1. The 6 is further from the 0, and it's positive, so my answer is positive 1. Question 4. My signs are the same, so I find the sum. I find the sum of 4 and 7. 4 and 7 gives me 11. And since they're both positive, my answer is positive 11. For question 5, my signs are the same, so I find the sum. I find the sum of 2 and 8. 2 and 8 gives me 10. They were both positive, so my answer is positive 10. For question 6, my signs are the same, so I find the sum. I find the sum of 9 and 4. 9 and 4 give me 13, and since they're both negative, my answer is negative 13. For question 7, my signs are different, so I find the difference. I find the difference of 8 and 3. 8 minus 3 gives me 5. 8 is further from 0 and it's positive, so my answer is positive 5. And for my last question, my signs are the same, so I find the sum. I find the sum of 3 and 10. 3 and 10 give me 13. They're both negative, so my answer is negative 13. And there is all you need to know about calculating integers, whether they have brackets or not.